favorite NBA analyst because of the
she's
introduction.
she's bringing the heat.
As long as I can.
No. We're hanging on to you. You bring great NBA content. You're a regular on the show.
Thanks
a friend of the show.
Thanks for having me
Cross town. Holla. Yes.
All of it, Sarah. All of that.
I can't talk to him about basketball all day.
Oh, my gosh. All the hate this morning. Talking about my salary caps.
Trinidad, my brothers.
Talking about my pin.
Nick's wearing a pin because apparently first things first.
We're big in Trinidad. You smart.
It's smart, man. James Harden is likely going to win the MVP award. That much most of the NBA world can agree on. But his game aesthetically pleasing, some say not so much. Hey, looks aren't everything. I learned that back in high school. Don't tell that, thank you, to his head coach, Mike D'Antoni. D'Antoni, who many believe to be an innovational offensive mind, had this to say about the Rockets star.
Yeah, that's the best offensive player I've ever seen. It's just, he does things. They were running guys to him. He just steps a little further back and makes them free. And I just, the way he can pass and see the floor, get fouls, layups, floaters, maybe a lob, maybe out to the corner. It's just, he has so many weapons, and now he's shooting those step back threes. It's impossible. It's impossible.
Some big words there out of Mike D'Antoni. Sarah, how far off is he in his assessment of James Harden?
I hesitate going into James Harden's game because of the year he's having, because of how much I believe everything short of the best offensive player I've seen is accurate. He can score in so many different ways. The way in which we've seen him facilitate has been tremendous. But D'Antoni's saying the best offensive player he played with Kareem. He coached Kobe. I'm from Chicago, so Michael Jordan is it for me. You go through the list of players, Oscar Robertson, I could keep naming different players, and James Harden has been tremendous. But I also think you have to look at D'Antoni's style, how much that lends itself to why James Harden is able to put up the numbers he has, utilizing the type of talents he has. The game has changed. This is a different era. James Harden, for the last 6 years, has averaged about 10 free throw attempts per game, gets 8 or 9 points per game from the free throw line. A big part of that is the way in which they have changed how you can play defense. So I think there's a lot that goes into what we're seeing out of James Harden and what we've seen out of him the past couple seasons, but not over the duration of a career to call him the best offensive player that we've seen.
Listen, I think Harden should be the league's second ever unanimous MVP this year. I have been preaching this gospel for quite some time. I was in Houston when they traded for him. And I remember, because I'm such a stats nerd, looking at his per 36 numbers coming off the bench in OKC and believing Houston got a superstar. And in the last 4 years, he's led the NBA in points created. Just, points scored plus assists, points. There are so many things you can say that sound hyperbolic about James Harden that are, to me, very defensible. You want to argue he is the smartest offensive player ever, with the way he almost games the system with foul calls, with the way he absolutely understands the value of a 3 versus a 2. You can have that argument. Now it might be an argument, you have that argument. If you want to do what Daryl Morey said to me at the Sloan Analytics Conference a few weeks ago, that James Harden is the best isolation player ever. We can break it down. We can have that discussion as well. If you want to talk about where he's going to finish ranks among shooting guards all time, Jordan 1, and then there's Kobe, there's Wade, there's Jerry West. Is James Harden already in the top 5? I'll have that discussion. So I'm not here to knock James Harden, but to call him the best offensive player ever when he's not the best offensive player. Cece, you put it. Is there a franchise Harden's played for that he's the best offensive player in the history of that franchise?
Not that I know of, because the first thing that I thought of was, when he was in OKC. Man, Kevin Durant's a better offensive player, in my mind. I just get caught up on, I listen to what people say. If you do an interview, someone puts a microphone, television there, I just listen to what people say. Ever? Man, you know how long ever is? I think people forget, because even to say that James Harden is the smartest, ever, we don't even have all the information to determine ever. Is he the smartest ever? Is he the best ever? I'm just talking based on my eyes, what I've seen.
Right.
And if you're going to do this, if you're going to make a comparison to a great of this era, you have to try to transition. So last night, what I was thinking about, what would Michael Jordan be like in that spread offense with today's rules, where you can't hand check a guy? Michael Jordan averaged 37 in the old rules where you could clothesline a guy coming down the lane.
Right.
So stop that right there. Now imagine Kobe in recent history. Kobe is a better shot maker than James Harden. Now, as far as distributor of the basketball, drawing fouls and everything, people can argue those other things. But Kobe, to me, is a more dynamic offensive player. And I'll take you to current day, Kevin Durant. If you ask me, Kevin Durant is the best offensive player in the NBA. James Harden is special. This run that he's been on the last 4 years, it's been tremendous. And we're not trying to take any shine off of his MVP season. But if your coach opens his mouth and says something like that, we have to respond. And ever, man, people just lose. Ever, that's a long, long time.
Well, and when I was asking you about it in this franchise, if we talk about big men, you said you thought Akeem, as far as Rockets history,
yes.
that Akeem was a better offensive player than Harden. Just in the history, pardon me, of his current franchise.
Yes. So that's the Durant in OKC, and now in Houston, I believe Olajuwon was a better offensive player.
I was just going to say, and we're seeing very special seasons out of James Harden the past 2 years.
Sure.
It's 2 years. It's 2 years, and take no credit away from what he's been doing, because it has been spectacular to watch. But going back to the greatest ever, that's mind-blowing.
But are we all tainted a little bit just because his game is not as flashy as Kobe's or Jordan's or any of these other guys?
Listen, I think that if Harden continues on this pace, from a purely offensive perspective, you are going to be able to make the argument about him versus Wade, him versus Kobe.
Yes.
Like, from a purely offensive perspective. Now, defense, Kobe was one of the best defensive guards ever. And I would argue Dwayne Wade is the single best shot blocking guard ever. Like, that specific skill set.
I don't think Harden's going to ever be able to approach Kobe, because what Kobe did in the low box, his ability to duplicate the Olajuwon shake, his ability to post up, and Kobe Bryant can play above the rim. James Harden can't do those two things right there. So for me, it'll be hard for him to ever be able to reach Kobe
I agree with that. And we talk so much about James Harden and his three-point shot, his step back, and the analytics side, what he can do. And it has been deadly, but he's still shooting about 37% from three. He's not shooting 41, 42% from the three-point line.
And there's two names that haven't been mentioned that I think, like, listen, if we're talking about best ever on anything, we have to acknowledge Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
No.
Like, there's a reason he scored more points than anybody.
And I don't care how long he does it, he'll never do it as long as Kareem.
No, nobody will do it as long as Kareem. And Kareem creating the only, I believe, unblockable shot in NBA history in the sky. Like, we sometimes lump big men into one category. I said before the show, I said, I don't think Harden's more of a dominant offensive player than Shaq or Wilt. And Cece brought up those guys were. It was less about skill and more about brute force, and I understand.
And the lack of other big people that could contend them.
And go ahead.
So I was just going to say, part of Harden, though, I think is his physicality matched with his quickness, and that goes back to what defenses can do with hand checking. And I think part of it is his strength and his ability to be explosive.
How much of his recent success, though, is from Mike D'Antoni's coaching and playing under that system?
Well,
and would he be this successful playing for someone else?
That's a good question. I think a big part is D'Antoni's system, the green light, putting the ball. I mean, to put the ball in his hands, that was before he became a point guard. We were thinking, is this going to work? And James Harden played the point guard position. He proved he could. Now he has a second ball handler in Chris Paul. But I think that's a major factor.
Yeah, sometimes, too, you give credit to the system. D'Antoni's system has always put up huge numbers. But we also have to look at James Harden, how much he's improved his game. When he left college, what type of player he was. In OKC, coming off the bench, what type of player he was. A coach can't put you in position to dribble the ball the way he does. All the moves that he has created, he has studied the game to understand what he can do within the rules. Like, he's amazing. I mean, in one-on-one situations. So I'm not going to give the coach credit for that, because I see D'Antoni's system every year, and you don't get those types of players because it's up to the player.
Right.
And James has developed his skill.
And Harden should have won an MVP and finished second in an MVP before D'Antoni got there, when Kevin McHale was there. Yeah. Steph's first MVP, I thought that, I mean, the players awarded it to James. I thought it should have been James's MVP. So again, like, his coach put him in a tough spot for the conversation. Yeah, because all of us think he's the league MVP. All of us think the Rockets could win the title in large part because of him. But I mean, is he the greatest offensive player ever? Like, of course not.
Just
like,
look up ever. Just look how long that is.
Look how long
Sarah,
ever.
stick around. Coming up, can the Raptors recover from what LeBron James did to them last night? Nope, franchise is going under. That's next on First Things First.